yeah, like, yeah, it's all about perspective, I guess. And you're right.
Yeah.
Like when we're in that, in sort of the deeper area of the like depression phase or the anxiety phase or the negative phase, like the deeper place, it's a lot harder for the positive shit to penetrate.
Yeah.
So that makes
I do
sense.
feel like this year is like particularly hard to get
Mm,
away from a bit, like to, I don't know, enjoy the nice stuff.
yeah.
But also can be a hormonal. If you're like PMSing, you're not going to be going to be like, fuck this.
Oh yeah, there's no way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my therapist was like last session, she was like, after 10 minutes of me talking, she's like, are you like in that time of the month? And I'm like, no.
Yeah. I know. Right? I always want to say no, even though sometimes I am.
Yeah.
It's like that's the thing that our society and most men don't understand is like when women go through PMS, it's like we have a mental breakdown. It's literally we have a mental breakdown every single month, and it takes a lot of self-awareness, a lot of work to be able to do anything. To be able to go grocery shopping, to go to work, to answer an email, to answer a phone call or a text message. It takes so much to not like fucking go insane. I don't think people understand that.
You don't
Like,
understand.
yeah,
It's
they
so
don't
funny.
understand. And all they want to do is make fun of us for it. Be like, is it that time of the month? Because that's easy for them. But it's not easy for us. For people who have uterus, who have a uterus and who go through this every single month, it's not easy. It's very, very difficult and painful.
Yeah.
And I feel
And
like,
it's
mm,
terrible when you forget that it's like you forget that it's a cycle thing, and you're like,
yes.
huh, well, my boobies hurt.
Yeah.
Huh,
And it's
why do I
not
want to kill everyone?
and it happens so fast, right? It's like okay, like my let's say my period lasts about 5 days. After 5 days, it's over, right? And then I start to feel better. 1 week passes, that week is good. Second week comes, and it's like okay. Third week, it's suddenly it starts again.
Mhm.
And then the week after you get it, and so those 2 weeks you're fucked. So technically, women only get 2 weeks out of the month where they feel really great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just I feel like all of us should get 2 weeks off
Off.
every single month. Yeah. Paid leave, paid sick leave every single month. Yeah. We should. We deserve it. It's like if society wants us to have babies and take care of them, it's like give us 2 weeks off every single month the moment we start menstruating. That should be a law, a
Yeah, I
universal
think
law.
we're really close to get that. Think
All
about
right.
how the conversation is going. Yeah, yeah, we're going to make
All right. Let me ask you some flashcard questions.
that. Oh yeah, what's this for? What am I doing? What's
Oh yeah.
happening?
This is a show called Coffee Prince, and it came out I think 2007, and it's considered like a positive queer show for like Korean TV dramas. And yeah, it is. It's got some positive queerness, but it's also got some negative queerness. So it's a complicated show. I'm glad it's out there, but all it does is make us realize that um, we can celebrate some queer happiness, and there's a lot of queer progressive work to do. So let me ask you some flashcard questions based on this show. Okay, let's say you're a young woman in her early 20s, and you have short hair, right?
My God.
And your name is Unchan, Ko Unchan, okay? You have short hair, you wear men's clothing, and everybody confuses you for a man, all right? They all
Oh.
think you're a boy. You live
Mhm.
with a younger sister who is in high school, and you have a single mother, and your father died when you were a teenager. And you meet this man named Che Han-gyul. He's a very rich brat, like typical rich boy brat. Okay, and that guy, he keeps getting set up by his rich grandmother on blind dates with other
Mhm.
rich women because they want to make their rich dynasty a bigger dynasty, and he wants to get out of these blind dates by tricking women into thinking that he's gay, and he asks you to be his partner in crime. What do you do?
But I'm a female, right?
Yeah. He doesn't know that though.
Oh.
Hmm.
What a twist.
Mm.
And how do I feel about him?
You just met him. He's just some rich,
Is he going
snobby
to give me
asshole.
money? Is there
Yes,
money
he
involved?
pays you
Okay.
per date.
Oh, and I need this money.
Yes, you
I
do.
need it.
Hmm.
Great. So this works out perfectly. Do I
So you
have
say
to?
yes.
I will say yes, but do I have to do sexual stuff?
Ah, good question.
Because that costs extra.
He pays you based on like pats, like touch on the head or touch on the shoulder. He does kiss you too at one point,
With
like
Tangy?
as a no, as a joke. Like he's like very happy that he got out of one date, so he grabs your face and he kisses you on the mouth, like really hard, like just as a quote unquote joke. And he pays you for all of these physical touches. Yeah.
Wow, what a weird thing. And then they fall in love because that's what happens. She's like,
Yeah.
he kissed me as a joke. I will love him.
He kissed me as a joke, but I was not joking. In my mind, I married him. Okay, so you
uh,
would say yes. You would go with it?
well, apparently I need the money, and I already had the look that he's going for, and he's going to get a surprise when he sees what is
Right,
underneath
right,
my
yeah.
pants. But
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. He already has what he's looking for. It's like you're his style. You're his taste.
yeah, I mean, he's a pig, but
Yeah, he is. He is. Rich people are pigs. Okay, great. So, question number 2. You're Hangul, this rich guy now, okay?
Mm,
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. You're still Unchan. You're still the tomboy. Okay, so Hangul, the rich guy, he doesn't know that you're a woman, right? He thinks you're a man. You just don't correct him. He just assumes you're a boy. You never said you're a boy. You just don't correct him. And he treats you like a punk kid younger brother, you know? He's like very broy. And he tells you that he inherited a coffee shop
mhm.
and he revamps it and he calls it Coffee Prince and he needs to hire a team to work there. But he's only going to hire men because it's called a Coffee Prince, right? And you want the job, you really need it. But he's only hiring men and you really at this point as an employee, you really need to decide whether or not you want to tell him you're a woman or a man. What do you do?
Well, I will take the job, and then in some point, after running the shit out of this coffee place, and everyone be like, "This is the best place I ever have coffee," I will be like, "Look at my breast."
Oh my god. Jesus. So you just
Yeah.
flash him?
No, well, I wait for him to tell me, "Hey, you're being the best employee. Thank God that you have a penis." Uh, and I couldn't do this without you, and thank God I only hire men, and blah blah blah, more piggy, sexy shit, and I would be like, I would be like, oh cuckoo.
I like how you call sexist men piggies. I think that's such a cute way to describe them. You
Yeah.
sexist piggy.
Oink oinky.
Okay. I didn't quite understand your answer, but sure. Yeah, let's go with it.
Well, the thing is, I will do a great job, and then I mean, I will do a great job, then he will be
Okay.
surprised by it,
Yeah.
and then I will expose my genitalia to him, and he
Hmm.
will be like, it wouldn't change his mind. He will still be against me because I'm a woman, but I prove a point to someone. I don't know.
Okay. So
Maybe the audience.
it's more about showing that women are just as capable as men. Got it.
Because
Got it.
apparently he doesn't know that. What year is this TV series?
2007.
Oh my god.
2007. I know, not that long ago, man. Okay, great. I understand now. Okay. All right. So you're still in Chan, and while you're working with this guy Hangyo, you of course start to develop feelings for him, right? Of
Of
course.
course. Of
But
course.
Hangyo thinks you're a man. In fact, he really likes you, and he treats you like a close sibling. And one day he tells you very seriously, he says, "You're gay, right? But I'm not. But I want to be close to you. Let's be blood brothers, okay?" And yeah, and he fucking pierces your ear. It's really fucking weird. You really want to confess your love to this guy, but you're stuck in this weird predicament because you've been lying to him for months and you feel guilty. What do you do?
I don't get like the piercing in the ear. Is that
It's because he has an earring and he wants you to have a matching earring. But
it's a
it's
bit
also,
creepy.
it is, it's a little creepy. It's absolutely creepy. I agree.
Hmm.
The whole thing is creepy, actually.
It is. It's really fucked up. I can't believe it was in 2007.
Yeah, I mean, rich men, they'll fucking go all the way. They don't care. They have nothing to lose.
Oh, you know what do I do? I will create an alter ego. I
Hmm.
will I will say that, oh, my twin sister is coming. This is very soap opera.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
will be the fake twin sister. So I cannot stop lying. Apparently, I have a problem.
yeah.
So so I would just like be like, and then he will have the same feelings, but now to a girl. And then everything will be weird when he's like, "Hey, we should invite your brother to the wedding," and I'll be like, I didn't think of that."
Okay, so you would write a whole new script, basically.
Yeah, I think this. Didn't they do that in the series? I feel like it's a great idea.
They didn't do the twin sister thing. I like the twin sister thing, though.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that really raises the stakes. I mean, that goes like fucking crazy level. I love it. Yes. All right. Okay. So let's say you're
Oh,
what?
what? Then I fake the accident of my brother, and then I just live life as a woman
Your brother had an
that I was
accent?
already. No,
Wait, men have an accent different from women?
no, accident. Sorry,
Oh,
I have an accent.
accident.
Yes.
Oh, so you kill him off.
Yes.
Wow. You're
And then at
crazy.
some point, he's like, "Wait, but you also have a piercing," and I'm like, "Oh no, he's fine out." That's how.
Wow. I think you should have written this show.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So let's say you're Hangyo now. You're the rich guy, okay? You're the rich guy. You're very strangely attracted to this Unchan guy, okay? But you know you're not gay. You've never had gay feelings towards any man before in your life, okay? But you're very weirdly drawn to him, and he's a man. What do you do?
Well, I guess if I was this guy, I will fuck a bunch of women to feel empowered.
This
I
guy
feel like
or you?
I'm channeling this guy. I think I will rent a boat, a big yacht. No, I'm pretty sure my family has a yacht. Forget about that. And I will just invite a bunch of, I want to call bitches because I feel that that's how he talks
Of
about
course.
women. Um, and a bunch of bitches. Oh, I can invite Leo DiCaprio. I don't know if he was doing that as well in that.
Yeah.
And then I will fuck a bunch, and then I will do all that, and I will be like, oh, I feel much better now. And then
Yeah.
she comes along,
Yeah.
the boy that I'm trying to, and then I'm like, oh no, I still want to suck his dick.
So you did all that yacht renting and fucking women for nothing.
Yeah, and then he's like, oh boy. Wag, wag, wag.
Yeah, it's like I ate out all these bitches, but technically I wanted your cock in my mouth. Oh my
Oh,
god.
oh, it would be great if we have like a sauna scene
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm,
she's like, "Oh no, he's going to find out." And he's like, "I
oh,
want to see his dick."
Jesus. Okay.
Is that happens?
Uh, no, that's in your fantasy, my friend.
Okay. I love my seriousness.
Yeah, it's great. It's so good. I want to see it. Okay. So let's say you're a man. You're a guy named Che Hansung. You're a different guy. You're this big shot music producer, okay? And you used to date a really hot woman named Yuju, who is a big shot painter, super famous, okay? And she broke up with you years ago, moved to New York to live with some other guy, some other rich guy. And one day, she just shows up in Seoul at your house and she says she wants to be with you again. What do you do?
Why does she want to be with me?
Just changed her mind. Felt like she missed you.
Oh,
Mhm.
oh, she has something. Something's happening. What's happening? Am I a good person?
You're a really nice guy, yeah. And when this
Oh,
woman left you, you were really heartbroken and,
well, I
angry.
guess
Yeah.
if I'm a nice guy, I guess I'm a bit dumb dumb. No, but do I love myself? Do I love a little myself?
I
I
don't know.
need to.
Ask yourself that as this character. That's a good question though. Do I love myself? Wow. So profound. You're so profound today.
Yeah. What do you mean? Hmm. I don't know. I just feel like I cannot stop picturing Mariah Carey.
Okay.
For some reason, I'm just like picturing her, and I don't want to go back to her. So I would say no. I'm not going back.
Perfect answer. Okay. Yeah, yeah. This bitch is being a Mariah. Yeah. She can go fuck herself, all right?
No, I think Mariah is great. If she's watching this,
Oh my god, I love Mariah. But
she's
Mariah's a
great.
diva.
Yeah.
Mariah, if you're listening to this, you're a diva. Okay.
Yeah, no, but she's someone asked her a question. It's like, so you had a mental breakdown, and she's like, no, I had a diva moment.
Amazing. Amazing answer. So every month for 2 weeks, we all bitches have diva moments. That's all it
Moments.
is.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you use a diva cup.
Ah!
The full story. It's a full
Very good.
circle of.
Very, very good. I love that. I love that. Yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
you're still this music producer guy, okay?
Hmm.
This young woman named Eun-chan, the woman that everybody thinks is a man. This very cute young lady named Eun-chan. She delivers milk to your house every morning. She's really cute. She's really fun, really lovely, okay? And you start developing feelings for her. But your girlfriend, Yuju, that painter Mariah lady, she sees what's happening and she tells you not to go too far with her, okay? And one day you end up kissing Eun-chan on the lips and your girlfriend catches you in the act. What do you do?
Well, I tell myself I'm an idiot. also, also, it was it a consensual kiss because
Ah, very
she's
good
like
question.
delivering milk.
Yeah,
She's
very good
delivering
question.
milk. She's just doing a job. She's just
Mm.
being nice, getting me my milk, and I'm like, ooh, you know who else has milk? I don't think he's a nice guy.
You're right. He's not. He's like wolf in sheep's clothing. That's what he is. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Um,
I know those people.
and the kiss was not consensual. Very good question. He just
Ah,
forced kissed his face when she was least expecting it. He just forced his face onto her face and smooched her, and she
I think this.
ran out of there
I think these two women should beat him up.
together.
Yeah, and leave him like on a, I don't know, therapy board or something, and then throw the milk at him. Like, fuck
Drown him in a bath
yourself.
of milk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I like that answer. All right. All
Thanks.
right. Final question. You are Hangyeol now, the CEO guy, the president guy. All right, the douchebag, the rich douchebag.
Mm.
Your girlfriend, no, I'm sorry, your friend, a friend of yours, tells you that Eun-chan is actually a woman and that she lied to you about her gender for months. Meanwhile, you went through all this mental and emotional agony, questioning your sexuality because of your attraction towards Eun-chan, questioning everything about yourself and willing to still pursue this person as a close friend, quote unquote, even though you thought she was a man. And you feel so betrayed. What do you do?
Well, I feel like I mean this is not what's going to happen, but I feel like in those moments he should have a bunch of flashbacks of all the times that he called her with like masculine pronouns or whatever,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, she didn't lie to me. She just she just was really nice and agree with me. She's the best.
Okay, so you would get yourself over it by doing this positive reinforcement thing.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen. He's going to go to her and be like, "You little bitch." And she's like, "Oh no."
All right. Great answer. All right. Thank you, Julieta. Welcome to K-Drama School. I'm your host, Grace Jung, and class is now in session. I have a few show dates to announce. So Wednesday, September 1st, I will be at the Yard Theater, 7 p.m. I'm going to be there in an unusual way, but my presence will be there, I assure you, okay? It's the Cold as Fuck comedy show, which is a variety show that I am co-producing and co-hosting with Kristen Lundberg. And if you don't know who Kristen Lundberg is, look her up. She is epically hilarious. She is brilliant. She's genius. And this is a comedy variety show that we're going to be co-hosting every month. So first Wednesday of every month. So we're going to do it again in October, again in November, and then we'll see how it goes from there. But it's going to be a really fun show. It's going to include stand-up comedy, drag performances. We're going to have clowns, but not the scary kinds, okay? We're going to have musicians. And Kristen brings an ice sculpture to every show because she is an ice sculptor. That's what she does. And at the end of the show, everybody gets to smash the ice sculpture on the ground. And it's a very cathartic feeling. It's awesome. So please go to the Art Theater Wednesday. This is in LA, okay? Wednesday, 7 p.m. And if you're looking for the Eventbrite ticket link, it's on my website at hj.com. Okay? On Thursday, September 2nd, I will be at the Arcadia Bar in Astoria, Queens, 8 p.m. It's a bar show. It's free. So if you're in New York, please feel free to come. It should be a good time. On Friday, September 3rd, I will be at the Tiny Cupboard in Brooklyn, 7:30. I want to read you a fan letter that I received from Dr. Mansa. Okay. Dear Dr. Jung, I have been listening to episode 32 of your podcast on Reply 1988, and I am quite excited. I enjoyed your conversation about race. Jovan Hutch is great. I didn't know about him prior to seeing him on your show. I am a 67-year-old Ghanaian woman, a former professor of sociology, now retired, and I discovered K-drama by chance at the beginning of the pandemic when I subscribed to Netflix. I am totally in love with K-drama. I'm into rom-coms and romantic dramas. It is interesting how K-drama is selling Korea to the rest of the world. I have heard there are several Koreaphiles in Ghana as a result, but I don't know any. I don't care for K-pop, but I do appreciate the original soundtracks of some of the shows that I watch. I wish you would look at the more recent dramas like Dear My Friends, Nabilera, or Love Alarm. I also wonder what you think about So Not Worth It. I did not like Han Hyun-min's character. I think he is sweet and charming, but why did they have to make his mother so unconventional and make him poor? Is it because he is Black Korean? I would be happy if you discussed that show one day. By the way, I went to university in Germany in the 70s. Berlin was always a cool place. I did my magister in Heidelberg and PhD in Frankfurt. I went to Ghana in 1985 after my studies and taught at a university here for 30 years. I had a good Korean friend during my time in Germany who I have lost touch with. I have searched high and low on the internet but cannot find her. She told me about the student uprisings and other things. Anyway, I hope to visit Seoul, Busan, and Jeju Island when the pandemic is over, but I'm a little wary because I'm a Black ajumma. Thank you for your podcasts and everything. With respect, Dr. Mansa. Thank you, Professor Mansa, for your email, and I appreciate you mentioning the show Dear My Friends and Nabilera. I think those are really good shows to cover because they discuss aging in a very frank manner and the difficulty that a lot of elderly Korean folks face in modern Korean society. I'll be covering Dear My Friends very, very soon. It's one of my favorite shows, And it's written by one of my favorite Korean drama writers, so I appreciate you mentioning it. I think it's really awesome that you got to travel to Berlin in the 1970s. I am a huge fan of Berlin as a city. I just finished Ingmar Bergman's autobiography, who talks about living in Berlin back in the 1940s, and he paints a really grotesque picture of the city. But I truly love Berlin. I spent 2018 and 2019 there, and I have some really fond memories of that city. I made many great friends in Berlin, and that includes Julieta de Geze, who just did the flashcard series. The student uprisings in Korea in the 1970s were pretty huge, and the Korean government killed a lot of their own people for dissenting against the military dictatorship, which was ruling the nation at the time. So even though South Korea was technically a republic, a so-called democratic nation, after the Korean War, it was run by dictators for many decades. Honestly, like it never stopped, really, honestly. I mean, it's a lot better now, but like even up until the 90s, it was still kind of bad. So all those student protesters back then were really important people. But the unfortunate thing is that all those young student protesters from back then are now the ruling elite in South Korea. Okay, many of them abandoned their beliefs in democracy. A lot of them live comfortable bourgeois lives. They have a lot of institutional power. They have money. They have families. Okay, and these are things that make people lean very conservative, right? They're on the political right. Okay, so this just goes to show that all of us are susceptible to change, right? So we need to remain consistently self-aware. We have to make good choices in life, and we have to stay on the path towards, healing, goodness, wisdom, all that shit, right? That's what we need to do. Okay? And those are the things that society tells us to remain resistant to. So we have to keep, I don't know, reading and acquiring more knowledge and talking to people, acquire more wisdom, all that stuff, right? Okay. Today's show is Coffee Prince. It's a 2007 drama written by Yi Sun-mi, who is actually a romance novelist. Okay, so Yi Sun-mi wrote about 10 works of fiction. They're mostly romantic comedies, and this is the most famous and well-known of her works of fiction because it became a hit TV show in 2007. The show is also unique in that a Korean woman directed it. Okay, very few Korean dramas are directed by women. They're almost always directed by men, although the majority of them are written by women, which of course is now changing, right? Now that, South Korea is like being sought after for all their content, like all these fucking network executives are trying to hire male screenwriters over female TV writers who were there, right? So that's starting to change. So Yi Yoon-jung is the director of this drama. And when I was living in New York in 2011, I recall some of my MFA candidate friends at Columbia University's film program telling me that they were in classes with her or meetings with her. So she was getting her MFA at Columbia Film School. I believe she was getting her master's. Yeah. So she was around. She was in New York. So that's kind of cool. Coffee Prince is the show that made Yoon Eun-hye and Kong Yu very, very famous. Yoon Eun-hye was already kind of famous before because she's a K-pop star, right? She's a K-pop idol. She was part of the group Baby Vox. Okay, so if you grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, you would know who Baby Vox is. And she appeared in a lot of studio Korean variety game shows with other K-pop stars in the late 90s and early 2000s. So she was kind of a household name already. And Kong Yu was not as famous as Yoon Eun-hye, but this show made him a Hallyu star, right? He was all over the world, all over the place. And I mean, that's the reason why Goblin is such a big hit, right? It's because Kong Yu was this household name. Coffee Prince is most commonly cited as the queer K-drama. And if you listen to episode 12 of this podcast, you'll hear me saying that Coffee Prince is indeed a queer show, but there are many other shows that have out-queered this one in the last few years. Okay, so Coffee Prince is a good text to look at as a queer show for queer pleasure, but it's also a queer text that creates queer upset. If any of you are into queer theory and feminist theory, I'd strongly recommend the book Female Masculinity by Jack Halberstam, which they wrote when they were still going by the name Judith Halberstam. And it's a classic text on how to read queered female portrayals in film and literary texts. And here's a good quote by Halberstam. The tomboy movie threatened an unresolved gender crisis and protected or predicted butch adulthoods. There is always the dread possibility, in other words, that the tomboy will not grow out of her butch state and will never become a member of the wedding. Tomboys do not bond, they do not rebel, they do not learn, they do not like themselves, and perhaps most importantly, they do not like each other. So, Halberstam asks, where are the contemporary examples of tomboy films today? And it's hard to find them, right? But we increasingly find non-gender binary characters in films and TV shows in Hollywood today, right? This book was written over 20 years ago, back in 1998, and I'd say that Coffee Prince in part answers this question posed by Halberstam about 10 years after this book, Female Masculinity, is published. So you have Ko Eun-chan, who is a young woman in her early 20s. She has short hair. She dresses in loose clothing. She frequently gets misconstrued as a man, but she usually never corrects anybody who calls her a man, okay? Anybody who assumes that she's a boy, she doesn't correct them. She has a single mother at home and a younger sister in high school who she takes care of by working multiple part-time jobs every single day, okay? She is the family kajang, and kajang means head of household in Korean. It's usually tied to this patriarchal figurehead, like the father, who is often looked upon as the breadwinner, right? But in Eun-chan's case, there is no father because he died when she was a teenager. So she took on this onus as the kajang, right? This role, in part, is what makes Ko Eun-chan so masculine. So we see that gender is a social construct and a performance through Eun-chan's character, right? This is where Judith Butler's theory on gender performance comes in. She wrote Gender Trouble, which is a very influential book that came out in 1990. I recommend it to anybody who's interested in reading the fundamentals of gender theory and queer theory. But we can see through Eun-chan that gender is not only a costume through her clothing and haircut, but it's also a performance, right? Eun-chan's constantly channeling masculinity because of her association with breadwinning as a male role. So there's some internalized sexism there, but I can also look at this another way. For instance, when we look at pictures of Eun-chan as a kid, when her father is still alive, she was dressed like a boy. Her hair was short like a boy. And the name Eun-chan is a very gender neutral name. In Korean, it's neither feminine nor masculine. Eun-chan is a gender neutral name. And Eun-chan as a person was a tomboy regardless of the kajang status. So before her father even passed away, she had this kajang status. And it's interesting to hear how her younger sister addresses Eun-chan, right? Calls Eun-chan oppa a lot, right? So that all of this sort of demonstrates that gender is a social construct, it's a performance, it's a costume. Gender is not dictated by genitalia, essentially. But what happens? What happens? Eun-chan falls in love with a man, right? And this makes her change. So when she finally comes out as a woman to the man she loves, who thought she was a guy, she dresses in feminine clothes, she sheds a lot of tears. And then Eun-chan's mom, when she sees Eun-chan crying over this guy, she says, "Oh, my daughter is all grown up," and she's crying over boys. Okay. So this idea of the tomboy growing up or maturing means that she is done being that unconventional deviant. Okay. She is no longer going to be this non-conforming, androgynous figure. She's going to become the typical feminine being that is tied to materialism, aesthetics, whatnot. Okay. So the threat that was posed against society by this tomboy is mediated by the constant potential that the tomboy will eventually grow up and become a woman, not a tom man or not a butch lesbian. Okay. So if you're watching this series, you'll see that that's exactly what ends up happening to Eun-chan. Okay. So this is where we notice queer upset. Why does female masculinity have to become erased? Why can't it remain consistent? Eun-chan ultimately comes out as a woman, and Eun-chan is in love with a man. So we have heteronormativity, right? Had the show allowed Eun-chan to remain a tomboy, it would have leaned a lot closer towards queer liberation and queer pleasure, because ultimately there's nothing wrong with being a lesbian or trans, right? The other major queerness from this show is how Gong-yu's character Han-gyul falls in love with Eun-chan while assuming that Eun-chan is a man. So Han-gyul initially treats Eun-chan like a younger brother, calls him a punk, teases him, wrestles him, right? But then Han-gyul starts to develop feelings for Eun-chan, and he starts questioning his own sexuality, which he had never done before in his life. So we see queer potential for queer pleasure here, but the queer upset occurs when Han-gyul goes to a psychiatrist believing that his gay love is a mental disability, right? And the show's mise-en-scène in that scene when he's at the doctor's office is very negative. And it not only is homophobic, but it stigmatizes mental illness, which is already a big issue in South Korea. This show came out in 2007, so it's a little bit dated, but I don't think that excuses the homophobia and the ableism that the show entails. There's a scene when Han-gyul says to Eun-chan after wrestling her in bed in this playful fight or whatever, he stops and very intensely says to her, "You're gay, right? But I'm not. But let's take this as far as we can," right? So he's suggesting queer love here. Instead of having sex with Eun-chan, though, what Han-gyul does is he pierces Eun-chan's ear to match his own earring. And he tells Eun-chan that they can be blood brothers. Okay? This scene is highly suggestive of queer physical intimacy. It's like a gay cherry popping, right? Also, the single earring carries some queer weight as well. It's a deliberate choice on Han-gyul's part to use their brotherhood as a masquerade for their queer love. Okay? I felt like this scene was the queerest scene of all. Like, I haven't seen a scene like this in Korean TV dramas that sort of out-queers this particular scene. Although there are other narratives of queerness in contemporary K-dramas that I would say out-queers this one. Okay, so today I talked to a former undergraduate professor of mine, Dr. Mark Hussey, who is now Professor Emeritus of Pace University's English Department as of tomorrow, I believe. Dr. Hussey is a world-renowned wolf scholar, and funny story about that is when I told a friend that my college professor is a wolf scholar, he was like, "Oh my god, that's so awesome that he studies wolves." And I was like, no, I mean like Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf is a very influential feminist figure for me personally because I read her book, Three Guineas, when I was in undergrad. And it's a book that woke up the feminist in me. So it's a very critical book, and she's an important figure to me. Dr. Hussey edited and annotated the Virginia Woolf series published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. He wrote the foreword to the book On Being Ill, written by Woolf, which was published along with notes from sick rooms written by Woolf's mother, Julia Stephen, who was a nurse and who died when Woolf was very young. And Dr. Hussey recently wrote a biographical book on Clive Bell entitled Clive Bell and the Making of Modernism, which was published by Bloomsbury Press, which is very fitting. Clive Bell was part of the Bloomsbury group, which included figures like Virginia Woolf, like Vanessa Bell, like Leonard Woolf, like E.M. Forster, and others. And they were like this literary group slash artistic salon. They were just like a group that hung out and like shared ideas and created theories and talked a lot. I mean, it sounds awesome. I wish we had more of those things today, but I don't know. Unfortunately, we just have Twitter and Instagram and other bullshit. Clive Bell was an art critic and a painter, and he was Virginia Woolf's brother-in-law and husband to Woolf's sister, Vanessa Bell. And there is no deep dive biographical research text on Clive Bell, so Dr. Hussey wrote this book, and it's out now, and you can go and find it. Dr. Hussey is not only a great scholar and researcher, but he's also a really great teacher. And I congratulate him for officially retiring as of tomorrow. And I want to extend not only my congratulations on completing this milestone and closing this chapter, but also for beginning a new one as a full-time researcher and scholar. I wish you the best of luck. I do have to mention that the professors at Pace University in the English department are pretty much responsible for, me being a writer today. Honestly, like 15 years ago when I was taking poetry classes and essay classes and writing a lot and reading a lot in college, like a lot of these professors gave me the feedback and the encouragement and support that I needed, in order to really I don't know, muster the courage to become a writer, to become an artist. Okay, so I think our teachers are invaluable in that respect, and we should really take the time to appreciate them and offer them our respect and recognition, right? Because good teachers are not only life changing and life affirming, but I would say they're also life saving. Like, I was supremely depressed when I was in college. I was thinking about suicide every single day, and I was drinking a lot. I was drinking almost every single night. The only thing that I had full control over was my studies somehow. Like, I really stayed on top of that. And the professors, their compassion, their patience, and their willingness to be a good mentor to me, like, that's really what kept me surviving during that period. So, um, I would say all the academic achievements that I've made and the creative writing achievements I have made are in part um, due to their fine work as teachers. So shout out to Pace University's English department. There have been a lot of those, like Zoom conferences,
Yeah.
Zoom. I mean, what do you think of that? Do you prefer the Zoom conferences or do you prefer the in-person ones?
Uh, well, I prefer the in-person one when it means you're not going to die from COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But actually, the
yeah,
Wolf Conference, which last year it was scheduled to be in South Dakota
yeah.
in June, so it was canceled clearly,
Gosh, yeah,
or postponed. And then this year it was on Zoom, and it was remarkable. I mean, it
yeah.
was on Zoom, but it still was a full 4-day conference,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone felt great. And we had
Mm-hmm.
people from all over the world, and
Yeah.
it just, I mean, apart from at the end of the day wanting to just go out for a drink with everyone, it
Right.
just had a really good energy. And I think by now
Right.
we're also used to it.
I
Yeah.
think so too. I think the Zoom conferences are going to continue because I was able to participate in a workshop in Australia via Zoom, so I
Yeah.
think that's changing
I
a
mean,
lot of
that is the
things.
great thing about I was doing a session and I said, "Good afternoon," and then immediately the chat filled up with like, "Well, actually, it's early morning here in
Uh,
South Africa, and like here in
right,
Australia." And like,
right, right, right,
but it was, but that is, I mean, like I zoomed into people's classes for in
right.
California, which I would
Mm-hmm.
never have been able to, do before. So
Yes,
that's one silver lining.
that is, and it's a big one because it also has to do with like equity too. Like
Hmm. Right,
I, you know, per conference, I'll spend a minimum of $1,000
right,
minimum,
yeah, yeah,
and it's like uh, you know, can I go to like as many conferences as I
yeah,
would like? You know,
yeah. It's
so
actually been the people. Well, the main person who was organizing the conference, and then three other people got together, and they every month they have what they call a wolf salon, and
mm,
it's kind of structured in the sense that it will sometimes have a reading in common or a couple of presenters, but it's otherwise very open. And that's been amazing because it's 2 hours on a Friday,
yeah,
and people from about probably 16 or 17 countries sign in, and it's usually about
wow,
70 to 100 people. And it's just a really great energy. Really, it's really been
yeah,
sustaining for a lot of people. Like, someone in Brazil who said her country's in such a terrible state. It's been just great to kind of check in every so often with
yes,
other people. So, and
yeah,
yeah, you're right. It's enabled many more people to participate than
mm-hmm,
in normal times.
mm-hmm, yeah, and I was able to sit in like in a lot of those things during the, well, we're still in the pandemic, but especially last year when
Mm,
I felt really cooped up and,
yeah,
intellectually kind of like not stimulated at all. And sometimes you get so tired and depressed, you don't even want to sit and open a book, you just kind
yeah.
of want to
Oh,
hear
yeah.
people talk. And, um, yeah, like I got to hear a lot of really amazing people speak on really astounding projects. And that's been
Mm.
the upside of this whole thing.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, a lot of cultural institutions like museums did amazing programming during the
Mm-hmm.
lockdown. So
Mm-hmm.
you could like, there was something, I think it was the Frick in New York did
Mm-hmm.
cocktails with a curator every
Uh-huh.
month, and you could
Yeah.
just like sign in, and someone would be talking about a piece of art, and that, like you said, it was so isolating for so many people that it was great to even virtually just feel like there are people out there who are
Yeah.
interested in ideas.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's like the this is the future that, so many people had predicted, right? Like in sci-fi or in like a
Oh yeah.
doomsday philosophical way. Like, but there is an upside to it, as there are also downsides to it. Like Zoom bombing has been fucking horrific, and
Mm.
like Zoom stand-up comedy has also been horrific. Like it's like what?
Oh,
Like
that
you want
must be really difficult. Yeah, I've forgotten that you were
it's
doing that
yeah, it's
because
it's
you need
another thing.
feedback and you can only hear one person at a time.
Yeah, or they all just mute all their mics and you just have to deal with uh just talking to yourself, except there are people tuning it. So
Yeah, a laugh track.
yeah, like I don't know, we've become socially I guess I'll just say we've expanded socially, or like our social things that felt weird before are now like an everyday thing. Like
Oh yeah.
let me ask you, when you were buying that headset, for instance, like did you go through any kinds of hurdles mentally to buy that, or was it just like, oh, I just need this as a practical purchase?
I think it was the yeah. I mean, I suddenly, like everyone, the lockdown began kind of right at our spring break.
Uh-huh.
So I, I was teaching for 6 weeks in the classroom, and then there was a lot of talk, and then spring break happened, and Pace sent an email saying, we're going to extend work remotely for 1 week, and then we'll all come back. And I
Wow.
remember I emailed the president and I said, okay, so what is it that none of the other universities in the whole tri-state area know, because they're all shutting down for the rest of the year? And then, like, of course, they said, yes, we're shut down. So I taught just with my laptop,
Yes.
and it was really a mess. I mean, it was okay, but it was kind of on the fly.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, I should really get myself set up properly. So I like reorganized my whole office, because I've actually changed the orientation of my office. So I have this nice book background,
Mm-hmm.
whereas before it was like strewn with mess and my armchair and a window, and I had no idea what to do. So then I just went
Yeah.
online and ordered this thing. And then I
Yeah.
remember my wife's been working remotely. So I said, oh, can I do a test Zoom with you?
Yeah.
And I said, tell me if there's any difference when I'm using the headset. And then she said, you mean to tell me your students have been suffering through without the headset for the rest of that
Um.
semester? Because she said it is like night and day with the
Mm-hmm.
microphone was so much better.
Yeah.
And my computer is weird because I think the camera, I have a webcam now, but
Wow.
oh yeah, my camera, I have a Dell laptop, and the camera,
Oh my
I can't
gosh.
remember where they usually are, on the top or the bottom of the lid, but mine's the opposite place. So I had this box of CDs and a dictionary, and it was like precariously balanced on my
Right.
desk so that I could
Yes.
like be in the frame
Yeah.
for those 6 weeks of the spring 2020 semester. But the students were great because everyone was going through the same thing. But no, I didn't really have any angst about it. But I thought, now, of course, I realize I should have AirPods, but I am very anti-Apple, so I don't have any Apple products.
That's why you use a Dell,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Yeah.
It's like, I prefer a stick shift. I like a PC. It's like, I like to know what's going on.
Yeah. No, I never learned how to drive stick shift. I only learned automatic because the car my parents had was an automatic. So whenever I travel, it's like a nightmare because everywhere else in the world, they use stick shift and they
Right.
use military time and they use Celsius. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Oh, I know. I have no idea what that is.
yeah, I was
Like, I
just,
just get emails from friends in the UK saying, God, it is like sweltering here. It's 28 degrees. You mean it's below freezing?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
It's
it's
weird.
it's it's a mind fuck. But yeah, there are advantages to knowing how to drive stick shift. Um so anyway, congratulations on like being a retired professor, a professor
18 days.
emeritus. 18
Yeah.
days. Wow. I mean, but are you still teaching? It's August. You're not
No,
teaching.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm
So,
18 days until I'm officially retired.
oh really? So they
The end of
count you
this
through the
month.
summer. Wow.
It's like August 31st is the end of the fiscal year, and
Mm-hmm.
that's my last paycheck.
Wow. How does that
Yeah,
feel?
terrifying.
Really? You're kidding, right? You're lying. Does it really
No,
feel
it's really,
terrifying?
yeah. It, it's such an easy kind of cushion to have an institutional framework
Mm.
where, I teach. And I mean, I complain about it a lot, but it's still a great job because it's, 16 weeks vacation guaranteed every year. Although recently, in an academic sense, like in the last 2 or 3 years, I discovered that we are actually, our salaries are for 9 months. They're not for 12 months.
Oh,
And the
interesting.
reason, and what they do is they kind of, it's almost like they escrow part of your salary each pay period so that they can pay you over the summer. But in
Mm.
fact, you're not paid for 12 months of work.
I see.
You're paid for 9 months of work. So
Interesting.
I only understood that when I started having to get into whether I could really do this. Yeah, I mean, it's great in the sense that I don't have anyone to answer to, and I have nothing to prepare, no papers to grade. But it's scary in that it's unknown. I realize that the kind of work I do,
Mm-hmm.
I I can take as long as I like doing it because I know that I have that regular income.
Mm-hmm.
So now I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to think more carefully. And a lot of the things that I would do, like read people's work or write recommendation letters, is like, of course I'm going to do that. I kind of feel like that's part of my job. And
Mm.
now I'm thinking, oh, well, I've got to be a little bit more selective about that. I mean, I'll
Mm.
still do some of it, but I can't just say yes to everything because I
Right.
need to use my time a bit more productively. I mean, it's not like I
Yeah.
just decided to retire without any plan. I mean, I do
Of
have a plan.
course.
It's just, I never, I hate that word retirement because it has this connotation of just going fishing.
The end. Yeah.
What
Uh-huh.
I just didn't want to teach anymore.
Got it. Yeah.
So I want to do all the other stuff. I want to write. I want to go to conferences. I want to engage with my intellectual community. I just don't
Yes.
want to teach marketing majors how to read anymore.
Yeah. I remember when I was at Pace, like that was your constant complaint. It was just like, did you guys read it? Like the
Well, it's funny.
students.
I don't know. And she's probably younger than you, but there was a student called Madison Ritland.
Uh-huh.
I don't
Okay.
know.
Don't know her.
I, she lives in LA actually,
Mm.
and she was in New York the other day. So she let me know she was coming, and we had coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
she was telling me how she used to get so depressed because in an English major, I think it was a Bronte class,
Mm.
and she would come in and everyone would be talking, like, did you read it? No, I didn't read it. Oh, and she said she came into class like really excited to talk about the work, and most of the students hadn't read it and they were just hoping they could get away with it. And those are
Right.
majors. So yeah, it's kind
Right.
of demoralizing, but
It
it's,
is.
it's, I also just felt like I've kind of lost touch with the point of teaching English.
What do you mean?
I mean, literally, I'm just not, it's hard. I find it hard to but I can't quite get a grasp of what it means to have that major anymore because
I
it keeps
understand.
changing,
Yeah.
and there are so many things that it's trying to do, and there's a lot going on in the field of composition that I felt very antagonistic toward, which I would not want to be broadcast, but
Right. Right.
like the
What
idea that
well
it's
what
racist
did
to
you
teach people to write standard American English.
I see, I see. Okay, okay. Well, what did you think that the English major was when you were, becoming a professor for it?
Well, I guess, when I started, which is a long time ago, I really thought of it as just a sort of extension of what I'd done, which is just, reading a lot of books and talking about them and learning how to think critically.
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
I think I went to a very traditional my curriculum was very traditional, which was not unusual in the 70s, but it was, we started with
Where were you at
Anglo-Saxon.
again?
My undergrad was at Leeds
Right,
University.
right. Yes.
And basically we started in Anglo-Saxon and went through chronologically
Mm-hmm.
to about 1940, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of modernism at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and had single author courses on, Milton, Chaucer, Shakespeare.
Oh my God.
So I know the canon really well.
Yes.
And I guess, one of the things when I first came to Pace in the early 80s, I used to always say, the US has a pretty significant literature of its own, and yet we hardly ever seem to teach any of it. Why is that? And
Right.
it was all very English. But of
Right.
course, that's changed quite a bit now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the last few years, what I've found difficult was to get any sense of an actual curriculum. It was more like it's a collection of courses, and it could be arranged in almost any sequence.
Hmm.
So, I would teach a course on the Brontes, say, to
Mm-hmm.
people who didn't really know when the Victorian era was.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would teach 20th century literature to people who didn't really have any sense of, what had led up to that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what were those writers working against?
Hmm.
Which is understandable, but it's a difficult thing to accommodate everything that a whole department feels is important.
Mm-hmm.
For people to know. But I guess my guiding principle is always just teaching people to read in the sense of read in an engaged way, read
Hmm.
critically, and not not worry about whether you like it or not, but
Mm-hmm.
be able to talk about something even if you didn't like it.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
I don't know. The irony is the last couple of years, since I decided to leave, I would
Mm-hmm.
say the last 3 semesters were really great. I had really good classes and really,
Yeah.
good students. And I always like the students as people. I think that, they're just very unprepared.
Hmm.
So you had to kind of bring them up to speed at the beginning of every class. You couldn't really build on anything.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't assume anything. You just sort of start from scratch, which is why I invented this class called Intro to Literary Studies, because it
Mm-hmm.
just dawned on me one day, we all in the English department, we all assume that someone else has taught the students to do X, but in fact nobody has, because we're all assuming somebody else did it. So I said we need to kind of codify this and say, okay, if you're majoring in this discipline,
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of these are the tools, these are this is the language that you
Mm-hmm.
need to be familiar with. These are the
Mm-hmm.
traditions, even the idea that there are different critical approaches to something was a
Mm-hmm.
revelation to that
Yeah.
a feminist reading is very different than a Marxist reading, or it could cross, or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And there are no TAs at Pace. It's just directly from the professors to the students in
yeah,
a
it's all undergrad, so
much smaller setting. Um, UCLA is a lot bigger. It's the public school. There are hundreds of students per class. And so the TAs take on about 40 students. And
yeah,
all of us as TAs, we just accept the fact that there will be more than 30% of students who have never written a paper before. So every single section I've ever led included a few weeks of just how to write a thesis, how to write a paper, just basic stuff. We just kind of weave it in.
yeah,
And, we're in a quarter system, so the weeks fly by. They're 10 weeks. One and two of those weeks are like midterm, final. So they really zip by. And we have to make sure that they know how to do it because we're going to grade them on them,
yeah,
So yeah, there's a lot of pressure and burden, I guess, when it comes to that. And also, it's like students who come to an institution, like they come from all different kinds of backgrounds. Like, English might be a second language. They might have been like living in Sweden all their lives, like whatever it is. Or, they just went to like a shitty school, like a
yeah,
shittier school in a shittier district.
yeah. That was very difficult. You'd have 20, 25 kids in a class, and a really broad range of everything, ability, background,
Yes. Uh-huh.
experience. And yeah, there were some who already knew they'd been very well trained at their high
Uh-huh.
schools, and they come in knowing how to do college. And then
Right.
others who really, really have who are smart, but just don't yet know the methodologies and the language.
Uh-huh.
And it was, I mean, a lot of my teaching was general ed courses, those 211 to, the lit courses that everyone had to take, writing courses. So
Right.
I quite liked having that. You'd have like 20 students and 10 different majors, and that
Mm-hmm.
could be quite interesting unless they were really resistant and kind of annoyed that they had to do this because they didn't see the point. Then it can be quite wearing.
Oh, that's interesting. When they say that they don't see the point of reading something or writing something, I don't know. Like, I guess,
It's a very utilitarian kind of,
yeah.
how can I use this? And if I
Yeah, but
can't
you
find
know,
this,
what's hilarious? I felt that exact same way about math. When I was learning trig, like I was good at math until trig, like geometry and trig and calculus. Like when it hit geometry, they lost me completely. I started getting very low grades in math. I was good up to algebra, and then after that, it was like none of this makes sense. I can't understand it. you know but that was my constant question to my teachers. I was like, how is like this cosine theta business going to help me?
well, you didn't want to be an engineer, I guess you would have known. But yeah, that is not completely facetious for me. That's kind of why I never went to an American university, because I knew I'd have to study all those other subjects, and I really was just crap at everything in school except for
They
English.
didn't force you to do those things when you
Well,
were
until you were about 15, and then you could drop them, because English education is
really?
like a pyramid. It's like you're constantly narrowing
Oh,
until your last 2 years of high school. You're usually doing like just 3 subjects, and it's usually, my best friend at school was very unusual. He did double math and English, but he was a real
wow.
outlier. Usually you were
Yes.
like in the humanities or you were in the sciences.
Mm-hmm.
So I failed math. I retook it. I failed it worse the second time.
Mm-hmm.
I just moved on. And
Yeah.
I don't understand math at all, but I didn't need
Yeah.
it.
And I would go to the library at Pace, because the Pace library closed at 11, and I would
Mm,
just study for my GREs there for like 6 hours. And I studied my ass off. I still did. I got like 20th percentile for my math. Like it was just so
mm.
bad. And I studied like crazy. I just couldn't, I can't,
Right.
I can't figure it out. It's a
Look at you
language.
now, Dr. Young.
Yeah. Well, look at me now. I'm, sitting in
On
my
welfare.
closet, fucking, I, like it's interesting to me how, you've done the whole, like you've been in this grade school for as long as I've been alive. And, you have a life for yourself, you have a name, you have a career, and yet you still feel this um, anxiety, like going into
Oh
the
yeah.
next phase of your life. And it seems like that shit never ends, you know?
No, it doesn't.
Mm,
And I think, I mean, I guess my kind of trite response to that is that if you're complacent, then you're probably not going to get much done, because I feel like the anxiety is just, I mean, I know myself well enough now. For example, like my writing process always involves a great deal of anxiety. And like I go through these stages that I recognize now. And like I'll say I'll write something, and then the first stage is like, why the hell did I ever say that? And the
oh,
second is, there's no way I can do this. It's impossible. I'm going to tell them I can't do it. And then the third stage is like, it's like really painful, but I'm kind of
uh-huh,
seeing some way to do this. And then I kind of break through and think, okay, now I know how to do the work, and I've got to still do the work, but at least I can see that I can do it.
right.
I said to someone the other day, I really don't like writing, but I
Mm-hmm.
really love having written. I love
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of finishing something and just like,
Yes.
I mean, that in a way, it's been kind of weird with this book because, I submitted it at the end of 2019,
Yeah.
and then, it's like a year and a bit later it came out. And
Mm-hmm.
by then I was like, oh, I can't really remember what I said. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had this odd experience of people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, most of my writing has been on Virginia Woolf, and I think it's almost true to say I pretty much know everyone who's read my work. Like, I mean, I know them, I know who they are, or at least I
Yes.
know their names. Whereas with this, it's like out there in the world, and strangers are reading it, and I don't know who they are, and it's kind of
Interesting.
it's kind of disconcerting in some ways, because I want to connect with them and say, well, can I help you with anything? Can I explain something that you're maybe not understanding?
So
But
you'd say
yeah,
like
no, I
this.
don't think the anxiety ever goes away. It's kind of I mean, I think it's like people I've read about, performers who still feel stage fright, and yet you'd
Oh
never
yeah.
know it to see them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you're blasé about it, then you're probably not invested in it.
Norm Macdonald, who is a comic I love, um, he's admired by a lot of comics because of his like brilliant sense of timing. Like he's so effortless with timing. It's
Mm.
just it seems like he just kind of just wandered into the room and just said the thing very naturally and organically. But all of it is premeditated.
Mm.
And he complains about nerves. He's like,
Yeah,
it's before every show, before every stage time, I always feel
yeah.
terrible nerves. And I was like, what?
But
You know?
I think, I mean, it probably is a cliche, but I think like comics usually are pretty tortured people, right?
Yeah. But what I started doing was instead of saying, "Oh, this is nervousness," I just said, "Oh, this is adrenaline." I just
Hmm.
kind of rephrased it or reframed it. I'm like, "This is all
Yeah,
adrenaline. Like I'm feeling the
yeah,
adrenaline before I'm getting up on stage." And I
and that
just,
helps.
yeah, and
Because
yeah, no, I used to also get like arm, not pain, but like a numbness or like this feeling on my left arm before stage time. And now that's gone away, but I used to get it when I first started. It was
wow,
like a lot. Yeah.
could have been a heart attack coming
Maybe. Mild heart attack.
up. But
Yeah.
it's true. I mean, in a way, it's similar to how I because I recognize now that part of what I always go through when I'm writing something is the feeling that I cannot possibly do it. It's like I
Yes.
recognize that now. So it's like at some level of my brain, I say to myself, "You always go through this.
Right.
You'll get over it, even though it doesn't feel like you can."
It's just part of the
Um,
process
it's,
now.
it's part of the process, and I recognize that. So it's like when it happens, I kind of am anticipating it almost.
But how long
It's
did it
still
take for
it's
you
still a
to
real feeling. Well, kind of, it depends what it is, but it can.
but like at what point, like cuz you've been writing your whole life basically.
Yeah,
So like at what age were you like, okay, I do this every time. So now I just know this is just part of the journey of my
yeah.
writing.
I think it's fairly recent that I recognized that.
Really?
I mean, recent, like the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
because I
that's
do,
fascinating.
and the other thing, and I don't know if you ever watch your, playback of yourself, but sometimes if I have, for some reason, I need to reread something that I
Mhm.
wrote a while back, I read it and I'm amazed. It's like, how did I do that? How did I actually, I can't imagine doing that. Like I read it and I kind of, it's not like I forget that I did it, but I read it and I feel very distanced. It's almost
Mhm.
like I can look at it objectively and think, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense.
Mhm.
And then I think I couldn't do that today, but I probably
Mm.
could, because I'd have to go through that whole process. And I think
Yeah.
that's something, I mean, that I had a very difficult time with this biography until, and I don't remember quite when it happened, but there was a day when I spent so many hours just in despair,
Mm.
scribbling on legal pads and just feeling
Mhm.
like it's all impossible. Until one day I realized that what I was trying to do was hold the entire thing in my head.
Mhm.
And then I said to myself, "You're an idiot. Like,
Mhm.
break it into bits.
Mhm.
You don't need to, And I had this very conscious moment of like, oh, I could just write this piece and
Right.
do that separately, and I don't have to worry about how it fits. I can make the connection later when it's
Mhm.
there." But that
Mhm.
was a real breakthrough
Yeah.
at sometime during the process of writing the biography that I remember it was probably in this room thinking to like the light coming on and thinking like,
Yeah.
you don't have to, because I was trying to kind of see how does each part relate to every other part, and it was
Right.
impossible because it's,
Yeah.
it's like it's
It's
150,000 words. So
yeah, no, those kinds of moments, those eureka moments are like that's problem solving for a writer, you know. And those are important moments, right?
but it wasn't like it wasn't the problem that I recognized in the
You
sense
didn't
that
know.
I hadn't set out to solve that problem,
Right.
but at some level I was, I was being held back by that problem,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
it just kind of dawned on me, oh, that's what I
Yeah.
need to do.
It's like
Yeah,
part of us knows like what the problem is. It's just it's not on the forefront of my mind. It's like not in our consciousness, and we can't think it into words and name
right.
it and then do something about it actively. But it's like
Yeah.
subconsciously you did understand or see this problem and you were
Mm,
working it out anyway. Like, did you do something different, or like did you get up and drink a glass of water? Like,
yeah.
was there something that took place that made you come to this realization at all? Or was it just like you were working in the flow and then you're like, okay, here it is?
I think just it was literally like a light coming on. I just
Yeah.
kind of had this revelation like, oh, I can just work on this little piece. I can
Mm-hmm.
work on this year or this
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to all fit perfectly now. It
Right.
can, and really what I sometimes, I'm not a very regular like journal keeper,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things that I like to do is kind of set up a dialogue with myself. Like I
Mm-hmm.
do a Q&A. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the things I often will say to myself is say, well, okay, imagine that you're a student sitting in your office. What are you saying to them? And I'm like, always like break it down into parts. Don't let it overwhelm you. You don't have to,
Right.
it's not like taking a Polaroid. You don't have to press the shutter and like everything all's there all at once. It's
Yes.
gradual. And it's more like, I say I used to say like, do you know how a movie is made?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the first thing you see on the screen was the first thing they shot. That might have been the last thing, but it's
Right.
like somebody put it all together when all the bits were available. So I think it was something like that. It was just like
Mm.
telling myself to do what imagining myself as coming to my office and saying I'm stuck,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just
So you
kind
coached
of
yourself with
talking
your own advice. Yeah.
kind of, yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's wild, isn't it? Like we have the advice, we have the answers, but we don't listen to it
Oh no.
ourselves. We can
Well,
hand
the
them out all
analogy I
day.
make is it's like, if someone I care about has a pain, I'm like, go to the doctor. Whereas
Right.
for me, myself, it's like, it's probably nothing.
Never. Yeah. My foot is rotting off. It's fine. I didn't like
Like,
that foot.
yeah,
It's okay. It can go.
it'll heal itself somehow. But
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
it was kind of, to me, it was kind of similar. It's like we're all hypocrites.
We are. We are. That's why, it's like I'm becoming the thing that I didn't want to become when I was leaving New York, which is I'm becoming like that California kook that
Oh, really?
is,
Got
yeah.
crystals on it. Can I just interrupt, Grace? Like,
Hmm.
is this the podcast?
Yeah, this is the podcast.
Oh,
This is how
okay.
it
So you're
goes.
just
Yeah.
gonna like pull pieces out of this and make something. It's, it's very scary because I'm, being very
Wow.
unguarded.
Yeah, you like controlled environments. Yes. You
Yeah.
like you like an itinerary, an
Oh,
agenda.
yeah.
You like
Absolutely.
schedule and order.
Timetable. Yeah,
Yes.
I do.
I like those things too. But I'm in
Absolutely. My desk is covered in lists.
Yes. Yes, I made a list this morning. Yeah. And I wrote you in at 5 p.m. That's what I did. No, I I'm trying to undo a lot of that right now. See, like when you said we're all hypocrites, like I completely agree because, it's like judgment is usually the thing that we judge ourselves the most with, right? Like any projected external judgment. It's like,
Mhm.
for instance, like I was dealing with the word stupid last week. I was like, this word stupid, like, what does it mean? It just means I think they're stupid, you know, because they don't know the thing that I know. Is that stupidity? You know, what is stupidity? What is stupid? You know, and I was thinking about this because this woman, like, I was listening to her like meditation session, Tara Brock, and she was like, most of our society in a capitalist world, it emphasizes the critical thinking, the analytical thinking, the hard sciences, the STEM fields. That's what they uphold and praise. So she was like, imagine how many people in the world feel stupid because they are not oriented in that way. And I was like, oh my God, like I feel so emotional right now. And I realized I think of myself, excuse me, as stupid. Like I realized that that's a core belief of mine. I think I'm a fucking moron, you know? And it doesn't mean that I am. It just means that like I was made to feel that way, and that I've come to believe that that is who I am. Like it's just like in my subconscious, embedded there. Like it's like unmovable. And that is in spite of everything, right? Like great undergraduate education, Fulbright, master's, PhD. And I still am like, you said it yourself. You were like, I'm an idiot. Why don't I break it up? Right? It's like, it's a meaningless
very
word,
deep. Yeah,
actually.
it's as you're talking, I'm thinking how what came to my mind is how I'm, and I think this is also quite common, is like all the praise in the world means nothing compared to like the one mistake or the one person who says no.
Yeah.
Well, like you
Yeah.
said, like you're stupid. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I spent 4 years working on this a book once, and it's an edition of one of Woolf's novels. And when it was published, I found this like a typo, and
Unforgivable, right?
that was all I focused.
Mm-hmm.
It was so stupid. I thought,
Yeah.
how could I have missed that? Because
Yeah.
it's meant to be a scholarly edition of the book, so it's like super carefully edited, and I went
Mm-hmm.
over it 1,000 times. I
Mm-hmm.
know how it happened, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, yes, it's like you cannot. Well, it's interesting that you say that, with your recent PhD and all your achievements, and you've published books and you've translated books, but you feel stupid because of a certain context.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that is something in ourselves, like
Mm-hmm.
certain people who are like that,
Yeah.
because I, it's like I'm very distrustful of praise. I
Yes.
just can't. I think, and I used to have that fantasy in the classroom that one day there would
Mm-hmm.
be a student who would just say, "Yeah, you're just full of shit. You know what you're talking about," and actually like call me on something. But I could never really imagine what that might be.
Right.
But it was this sort of, not even a fear. It was just like a fantasy I had that
Yeah.
someone will see through me, and I
Yeah.
I always found that position of authority very uncomfortable because
Yeah.
you know it.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
But
Yeah.
I think what you said is it's about going back to what you said about the meditation person that you were listening to is
Mm-hmm.
there is this emphasis on certain kinds of knowledge as being valued over others.
The only reason why my brain is telling me that I'm a failure and I'm an idiot right now is because I'm hearing a lot of praise. And my
Mm,
brain will do everything it can to
right.
defend itself against that
Well, it's
praise.
also a defense against, like, I think, being found out for the fraud that we are. It's like,
Yeah, we don't
but
know
then,
anything.
externally, of course, someone would look at you, look at me, and think, wow, that is a success, that an achievement. I mean, you
Yes.
think about how many students have this aspiration to publish a book or to translate something, and you've done it, and you will go on doing it. It's all kind of relative. When you do you
Yeah.
know Bo Burnham? Have you watched?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have a
Yes.
feeling you probably don't like him, right? But
No, he's very talented. He's
I
not my
just,
cup of tea. I find him immensely talented, though. Yeah.
yeah, his stagecraft is incredible. My kids
Yeah.
have introduced me to him, but
He's
when you were
brilliant.
talking
Yeah.
about suicide,
Yeah.
he's very funny about that.
Yeah. A lot of
Just
comics are funny about suicide
yeah,
because they think about it all the time. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, and also it's like such a taboo thing, but sometimes it kind of makes sense. Like,
And all writers
but
think about
I
it.
liked
Yeah.
his line. It was like, I'd like to kill myself, but like not permanently, just for like a year.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah,
No,
that makes a
that's
lot of
really
sense.
good. That's really good. You know, Mark Maron, who's a comic I love. I love his podcast more, but he says like, whenever I thought about suicide, I'd be like, yeah, but like, I still have to get back at that guy, So like like a sense of vindictiveness keeps
Yeah,
him
don't take
alive, keeps
yourself
him
out of the
going.
game. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, like but I hear what you're saying, and it's like interesting to me how, you know, you're somebody I consider a teacher, like a mentor. You're somebody that I look up to in a lot of ways. In fact, like your classes, I took two of your classes. Like the personal essay class and the Wolf seminar. Oh, and I think I took one more. But yeah, like I always loved your feedback. Like you were very good at giving feedback and like kind of noting like a specific thing that like a student is good at, like
Mm.
you're like, oh, you're very good at at like capturing emotion. That was like one note that I still remember, and I was like,
Oh,
oh,
that's
okay,
good to
like
hear.
yeah, I'll stick with that. I'll kind of intuit using my emotion as a navigation tool. Then that's something I wouldn't have thought of unless I received that feedback. And I think
Mm.
in that regard, professors and teachers are invaluable, right? Like to any society, like really to tell them like, oh, this is something you're good at, so stick with that. Because that's not something that we see on our own. All we see
Yeah.
is the negative voices in our heads telling us to go off ourselves. That's all we hear and see, you know? Yeah.
Hmm.
And I loved your wolf seminar because in that class, we read a lot of books, like whole books, which was like, for an undergraduate, it's like, well, we're going to read like a bunch of whole books like this
Mm.
semester. Um, uh, of course, when you're a grad student, it's like we have to read like 5 books this week, right? But I really like to this day, it's like a book that's been very influential. My favorite book in that course was Three Guineas. And I
Oh.
loved that book so much because, you know, Woolf was so good at articulating the necessity of feminism,
Hmm.
you know, and the hypocrisy of the patriarchy. Like she was just very good at articulating that and illustrating that very clearly. And it just like, that kind of like woke the feminist in me, really, that book. Did you still teach that
Yeah,
book?
I did. Yeah, my very last class was a wolf seminar last
Mm,
fall, and I did teach that, and it was great because there were some students who had sort of signaled early on that they thought Wolf's feminism was very white and very passé, and I
mm-hmm.
said just kind of let's just bear with it, and and I said she's writing in the 1930s, and clearly there are limitations, but rather
Yes,
than rather than see what her deficiencies are, is there, let's read her and see what she's saying in that context. And also, is there anything,
right.
salvageable, worthwhile now? And
Exactly.
I think pretty much everyone in the class was very receptive by
Yeah.
the end. That was good. And yeah, we read a lot of books.
Yes.
I, I, org, I organized that class into sort of clusters because that was one thing about teaching on Zoom was I did way more preparation and work than I would ever do. Because in a classroom, you
Yeah.
can not. I was going to say you can wing it, but I mean that you
Yeah.
can kind of respond on the fly to things. You can
Mm-hmm.
move
Mm-hmm.
very smoothly from one part of a conversation
Mm-hmm.
to another, and you can say, "Oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
we'll dwell on that and we'll pick up that next time."
Yes.
But I felt like with the remote classes, when everyone's lives was, they were quite uncertain, that I wanted to structure it also so that people who, for whatever reason, might have to drop out for a couple of weeks will be able to pick right back up and find out,
Yes.
they would know where they were. So I had these, I don't know if I'm going to remember them, but it was like war,
Mm.
women. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the other clusters, but so the works were all sort of
Mm-hmm.
jumbled up in different orders. And I had like 2 weeks where we would read maybe a novel and some short stories and some critical
Mm-hmm.
essays, and then like Three Guineas was with a much older piece, or so
Yeah.
it was kind of fun, um,
Yeah.
and and of course everyone is in their own room on their own, so it was, it was odd, but it's yeah, the thing about I think going back to what I was saying at the beginning is that feeling of having sort of lost my way as a teacher. Is like there are moments like what you just said is very lovely to hear, and the other students who've said they remember things from certain classes or things I said or discussions we had, and that's all great, and of course makes it very worthwhile. But it was overall, I started, and this is kind of connected to what you were saying about the devaluing of the humanities. It was like you feel like you're just sort of in this vacuum where you think this is important and you're trying to convey that to other people, but there's no real support institutionally, or that you see just everything dwindling and resources being put to all kinds of other things.
Well, what do you think the answer is to that then?
Well, I think one thing, and this I've been talking in my own wolf community a lot about this, is there's a real disjunction between the academy and the intellectual world outside. I mean, people do read a lot. I think there are plenty of smart people who love to read and talk about ideas. And I think academics have just stopped talking to them, and we just sort of talk to each other. And a lot of it is to do with the language that we use, which is, I mean,
Yes.
I actually enjoy high theory,
Yeah.
but I treat it almost like a hobby. It's like this little kind of thing that me and some aficionados can do and talk about, and but I still recognize it's kind of humorous when people talk about interrogating the intersection, and I'm like, well, you're not really interrogating it, are you? You're just exploring it or asking a question.
Right. Yeah.
But the language that has become a kind of code of entry to that club, I think that can be very off-putting to people who just want to read something without being made to feel stupid.
I think that's a huge point.
Yeah.
First of all, I think that's something that's changing like right now. Like I'm transferring my dissertation into my first book, right? And we were given this book by, her last name's Hag. I can't remember her first name, but she wrote a book called Revise. Like I think Yale University Press published it. And I'm having a tough time with the book, but one of the things, the first chapter was like, get rid of jargon. It's like, you want your book to be accessible. So remember, like, reading, I don't know, like Judith Butler. It's like, it's like, oh, let me read the most impossible thing. Like, write in an impossible way. Then you're gonna get a tenure track job. Like, it's been like that. It's like, the more obscure you are, it's like, oh, maybe he's like onto something that I just don't know, So, but now it's the opposite. It's like, write clearly and directly and write in a way that accommodates the reader. So that's sort of changing like right now as we speak. And the other thing is it's also very political. And I was just like, man, we on the left, we progressives have really, designed a kind of wall for ourselves, and we're sitting on the top and really congratulating ourselves for knowing words like intersectionality and blah blah blah, right? Like it's like or even words like, toxic positivity, right? It's like, what? It's like, do you know how to talk to your uncle who has no legs because he lost them in the war and is a hardcore Republican? Do you know how to talk to him? And the reason why is because like they don't want to feel like idiots when they're talking to somebody who is a progressive. And it's like, that is something we have to check, I feel. But at the same time, there is the importance of language and what language does in order to communicate complex ideas and whatnot.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm kind of hesitant to just say, "Oh, jargon's all bad," and it's
exactly
it's stupid, because I do think complex ideas sometimes demand complex expression.
Yes, absolutely.
But there is a kind of in-crowd aura to some of the language that we use, which I do think it creates a circle that can't be penetrated by outsiders. And I'm hearing that more and more from academics of like, yes, we've got to be able to talk to people more. And as teachers, we should be able to do that, certainly.
Yes. And, the great irony is like, let's say, for instance, like we do use a word like intersectionality, which isn't that big of a word, it's out there. Yeah. But like, let's say we use it in a book and like, we want to explain it, right? Let's use the word neoliberalism, right? Let's say we want to use the word neoliberal, put it in a book, but, we want to explain it for the reader to accommodate them. So we'll add a footnote. Is the reader going to read that fucking footnote? No, they're not,
just
right?
Explain it. explain it in the text. Yeah. Well,
Right, right.
intersectionality is a good, because like you and I, if we hear that word, we know because we've read all those books. But
Yeah.
for someone new or outside of that field, you don't need to use that word. You can just sort of talk about, it used to be that people would rank like what's worse, racism or sexism, but now people think more about how you can't really separate them, and that, just
Yeah.
explain it,
Yeah.
and that is called, academics call that intersectionality. But
Right.
it's like this whole huge thing about critical race theory. It's so frustrating because
Yeah.
it's such an easy thing to attack, because it sounds like just a bunch of woke jargon, but actually,
Yes.
of course, it's motivated by a sense of history and being transparent about
Yeah.
what has really happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think there's this sort of shooting ourselves in the foot on the left has become something that's pervasive.
Can we talk about your book before we wrap up?
Yep,
You
sure.
talked about it a little bit, but I want to hear more about it.
I kind of told the story of this somewhere. It was
Yeah.
literally it for years. I'm like where I'm sitting now. I'm looking at all my like Wolf and Bloomsbury books,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and every so often I would think, oh, it's really weird. There's no biography of Clive Bell, because there's biographies of like all the other
Hmm.
people.
Sure.
And so one day I thought that, and I thought, I'll just Google biography of
Yeah.
Clive Bell, and something popped up
Mm-hmm.
as forthcoming, but like years in the future on Amazon. So I have a friend in publishing in London. I emailed her and I said, do you know anything about this? And she said, yeah, I can find out for you. And it turned out that it was contracted in like 2004, but the guy never delivered the manuscript.
Oh,
But
wow.
it was in like the internet system, so it was announced as a forthcoming book, like, but never came out.
Hmm.
So then I just thought, that would be kind of interesting to see if I could do that. So I started
Yeah.
just asking around, and then I I know people, because I naively thought, oh, I've worked on Wolf all my life, so this won't be much of a stretch.
Mm.
So anyway, so that's how I got into it. It was kind of filling a gap, but then I really had to teach myself a lot about art, which was interesting, but a big learning curve. Um,
That is a big
but
one.
he's
Mm.
the last sort of major Bloomsbury figure that didn't have a biography. So, and
Mm.
as I was writing it, I began to realize that because of that, because there hadn't been much known about him on his own, I
Mm-hmm.
needed to sort of lay the foundation for. It's a very traditional biography in the sense
Mm.
that it takes him from the beginning to the end of his life. Um, and if people want to go into that and maybe develop one aspect or look at more, they could do that. But I felt like I didn't want to write a biography with a particular angle.
Hmm.
It was just sort of telling his story.
Right. Like, here it is. This was his
Yeah.
life.
Yeah,
This
and
is
it's
this
been kind of
person.
nice because a lot of people who've read it have said, "Oh, I had no idea that like he came to the U.S. in the 1950s,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a lot of affiliations the beyond just being Virginia Woolf's brother-in-law and Vanessa Bell's
Yeah.
husband. He kind of struck out on his own.
Why do you think people read biographies?
Hmm. I think that they read biographies because they like gossip. Mainly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a popular genre now. I have a really hard time with it, though. I ended up being quite anti-biography by the end, because
Hmm.
I think one thing I was really committed to was not saying anything that I didn't have evidence for, or a source for, not really evidence, but
Mm-hmm.
because when I'm reading a biography, sometimes it irritates me when the biographer says something like, Grace must have been feeling X. And I think, well,
Hmm. It's a
maybe, but how do you
projection.
know?
Right.
Unless she actually says that in a letter somewhere.
Right.
Or I was reading one a while ago, and it said, Simone de Beauvoir crossed the room and put her glass down on the windowsill. And I thought, okay, well, how do you know that? Like, maybe she describes it in a diary or a letter or something. But so that was one thing. I wanted to only say things. Did not want to speculate. I just wanted to
Right.
say what was there. And that is something when I'm reading a biography. I mean, I really enjoy a good biography. Like I just read biography of Adrienne Rich, which I really enjoyed, and I just finished a book called Ninth Street Women, which is about American women artists of the 50s who are abstract expressionists, and that was really fantastic. But sometimes I'll read one and I just think, you've made a lot of this up. In the sense that you just could have invented it to make it more readable and cut
Right.
corners, or, conflated things that were actually separated by 18 months. But I think people read biographies for the same reason we like to get to know, we're interested in other people.
Yeah.
My favorite kind are the ones that are biographies that give a sense of the context in which the person lived. Not just about their inner life, but actually what was going on in the world around them.
Yeah. Like the wars or the laws or the government or okay.
Yeah.
But I like that you did say like, well, it is gossip. It's a
Yeah, I
form
have
of
this theory that
tabloid.
all knowledge is gossip. It's like
That's an interesting theory. I like that theory actually.
yeah,
It's like no matter how much we abstract things and project them and turn them into this intellectual discourse, at the end of the day, it's just like, I mean, we want to be, like we want to be recognized, we want to be heard, we want to express. It's really all it is. And then hope, as you say, hope that somebody reads it, somebody catches it, that it resonates,
yeah, I
whatever.
think that getting away from the idea that we have the answer or I know this is a very cliche kind of post-structuralist thing, like the truth with a capital T. It's and I think that's going back to what you were saying about Three Guineas of Wolves before. It's like this. One of the things that attracted me to her is it's this provisionality. It's like, let's think of it this way. It's not like saying you must think this,
Right.
but like, let's turn it around and look at it this way. What do you think of that? And it's sort of dialogic. It's not didactic.
Yes.
And that's the kind of writing I like best. And I think that the genre of biography, I think one of the things that frustrates me about it is that sense of being told this is what the person was like, rather than this is my version of that person. And maybe that's, I can't think of another writer than Woolf who has, she must have about 30 biographies or biographical works. It's as if, people just keep turning her life around in the light and it catches different facets.
Yeah. But one can say that about any individual, right? Like, that's any person, really, I like how you say it's my version of this person. That's this biography on Belle. Yeah. I think that's how it is for everybody. Like any author, like any filmmaker who makes a biopic, it's their version of it, their interpretation.
Because inevitably you're going to leave. You have to leave things out. I remember there was a point I got to where I was really struggling with writing it, and I would say to people, "Ask me any question about Clive Bell, and I can tell you, like, where he was on this day or what." But to kind of determine how to make that a narrative, that's really difficult, because obviously you can't just write a list of, all the days, in this like millions of words long. So you have to make selections, and you have to emphasize some things and de-emphasize others. So yeah, it could be done in. I would probably do it entirely differently if I started it now. I could do it all again, and it would be a different book. But and people who read parts of it when I was writing it used to get frustrated with me, because they would say, "Well, what do you think?" And I would say, "It's irrelevant. It's not about me. It's about my subject. So wait for my autobiography, then I'll tell you what I think."
Right. But to them, you're the author, right? And so
they want to be kind of guided. And what should I be thinking about this?
Exactly.
And I'm like, no,
yes.
that's up to you.
That's not my business.
The material, and you do something with it. Yeah.
Boundaries. Yes.
And that's, to me, that's very familiar to like teaching a writer like Virginia Woolf, because the frustration that many students experience with a modernist writer like that is like, what am I supposed to focus on? What's the point? What's important? And I would say, well, that's up to you. It's going to be different.
Right.
It's going to be different now than if you read it 10 years from now. It's going to be different if you're somebody else. So
She's a very rich writer. Like, yeah, the way she writes is very rich. And I remember asking you this, like, when I came back down from a mushroom trip, I was like, Wolf must have taken some shit. What was she taking? And you were just like, well, she was on a lot of medication and some of them
yeah.
were probably hallucinogenic. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, I was like, why didn't any of my professors at Pace, when I was reading all these modernists and like, you know, learning about existentialism and going to MoMA and like looking at modernist art and da da da, like, why didn't anybody ever say that drugs were a big part of this? You know, like, I feel like that should have been said almost. It's like, on the one hand, yeah, like the ego gets obliterated when you see nuclear weapons or mass destruction, like with these kinds of weaponry. Okay, fine, yeah. But, you know,
It's
I
funny.
feel like a lot of these artists had other substances that were able
Yeah, well,
to.
Aldous Huxley was very into that mescaline,
Yes,
LSD.
yes.
Yeah, Clive Bell's granddaughter, who's a writer herself, she said she was very happy to learn that her grandfather used coke because I have a reference to that. She thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, not my drug of choice at all, but you know, it is known to induce psychosis, I hear, for people who are addicts. But yeah, I was just like that. I feel like that should have been mentioned. But
Yeah, T.S. Eliot, he used drugs.
yeah, and it's like, it's almost as if like, you know, once you see that other side, like what they saw or went to where they went, then everything that all their products make sense. All the things that they
Mhm.
created make sense. You know, like I was like reading the waves. I was like, now I can read the waves. Whereas for like 15 years, I was trying to and I couldn't.
I don't think Woolf actually needed drugs, though. I mean, she did take a lot of medications, but I think her
Yeah.
mind was such that
Yeah.
she had a visionary sense.
She was already kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
touched by the
Mhm.
stuff, or the portal was already open. We'll put it that
Yeah.
way.
No,
Yes.
I do think
Yes.
that. Yeah.
But one thing I will say is like, you know, you're a good example of a man who is a feminist because increasingly in our society, there are men who declare, I'm a feminist. And all the women go running the other way because they're like, he's a sick creep, you know?
Like Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, the reason why I say you're a good feminist, like you're a good example of a feminist, is because you read about women all the time, you know? And it's like, that to me is a feminist. It's like, I I consider women interesting human beings, worthy of reading about and writing about. Like that is like, all right, you know?
Well, that could be a whole other podcast. Like how did I end up, given my background as a Jesuit boarding school boy, reading Virginia Woolf and spending my life writing about her? Yes, it's like
Yeah.
what is the meaning of my trajectory? But thank you. That was very nice to
Yeah.
hear. Yeah.
We'll wrap up here. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Grace. It's great talking to you and lovely to see you too.